All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Duong. I will be presenting on an introduction to processing. We have some folks on the Zoom in the chat. Can someone on CCV be on the Zoom and holler at me if there's stuff? Cool. And then for those of you in the room, there's pizza in the back, so feel free to go and grab that. And we're going to get started. So let me slideshow this. Perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. This is an introduction to processing. Processing is a coding library for creative coding. It's for artists, it's for designers, it's for educators, it's for beginners. It's pretty much for anyone. So if you have no coding experience, that's totally fine. If you have some coding experience, that will help. If you're an artist, that is even more amazing. So I kind of want to like show of hands the room of like in terms of like coding experience. Are there people with no coding experience here today? Camilo. Okay. And then how many of you are like beginners at coding? Okay, cool. How many of you are very comfortable with coding? Okay, cool. So we got a mix of like beginners in code, some people good at coding. Okay, cool. Have you used processing before? Show of hands. Also known as P5 as well. Cool. So in the room, there were a few hands of people that have used processing before, but the majority have not. So I think you're all in the right place. So let's go back to what is processing. Processing is an open source programming language and integrated development environment curated to teach the fundamentals of computer programming within the context of visual arts. It was designed by Casey Reyes and Benjamin Fry. And so right now we're going to take a look at some example projects. So let me go to my, move the controls over. If we go to their website, it's going to be at p5js.org. This is what we're going to use. And their examples page will kind of show you some things that you can do here as part of this library. We can take a look at some things here. You can see like this is an animation, a particle animation. And in these examples, you kind of get some instructions as well as the code at the bottom on how to create that. So this is a kind of a more advanced project, but we're going to get something a little similar to this actually by the end of this hour. So get hyped. But you can take a look at some simpler examples. Whereas like this one is just drawing this line kind of going up the screen, and you'll kind of see comments down below to kind of tell you what is going on in this project. So feel free, play around with examples. If there's something that catches your eye, go for it. Now, this workshop is actually from a course I TA'd back in my undergrad days. And that course was Fine Arts 264 at the University of Pennsylvania. It was a course on design and it was the title has changed over the years. But it's basically like design and like computers and like different sort of ways to use art and tech together. So in that class, we used like Illustrator. I taught this section on programming. Now in this, the project there was that students would be taking in data from their everyday lives. They'd be recording like, how many times did I get a coffee today? How much hours of sleep did I get? Any kind of data that they wanted from their everyday life. They would create a pattern. So you'll see like here we have the code, and then they would create a pattern that they would then bring into Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, manipulate, and then print it out using one of the plotters, and then create some sort of wearable art from it. So this part of the workshop will just kind of get you to thinking about designs and stuff, but that's where this whole workshop is kind of from. For those of you beginners at code, Camillo, there are a couple of warnings before we kind of get started. Syntax is going to be important, okay? Semicolons, end statements, spelling, uppercase and lowercase, parentheses, these matter. How you spell something, hey Shook, how you spell something is going to affect your code. For those of you joining late, there's pizza in the back if you want it. Yeah. Oh, waiting room. I thought they would just enter. Oh, I feel so bad. Okay. Okay, I just admitted you. Can you, actually, you're not probably not the host. Hi, everyone who's just joined us on Zoom. So sorry, I didn't realize that there was a waiting room. So we're gonna do a quick back step while people are getting pizza and talk about what processing is. It's a coding library for creative coding for artists. An example of a project would be this, wherein you'll get like some sort of code and you'll get some sort of visual output, and that visual output can be used for something like creating this hat, which a student did in a previous course. So that's kind of what you missed. And I was about to say, like, if you have never coded before, like, know that there are a couple of warnings. Syntax is going to be important. So how you spell something, how you write something, how you match parentheses and things are going to be important. And then some more good coding practices for those of you familiar with coding is to comment your code. You're going to notice that I'm going to be using these backslashes, and that's how we're going to denote a comment in our code. Indentation is important, so you're going to want to keep your code neat. We're going to be using a web editor, so I'm unsure if this key command is going to work, but maybe it will. And then the next thing that's really important is naming your variables that indicates what it represents. So if I wanted to represent how many pies I ate this week, I would call it like const, which is going to be like to tell us that this is a constant variable. And then I would name it num underscore pies. Oh, I guess we're in JavaScript, so it's going to be camel case, but equals 3. So that's kind of me saying, like, more specifically that this is what this variable represents. Cool. So those are some good coding practices. Let's get started with your first program. So we're going to hop over to p5js.org. So if you go to there directly, you'll get into this page. And then on the side here, you'll get to see editor. Okay, so that's where we're going to be. And I'm going to increase the size of my screen. You'll notice that we have this file called sketch.js. We are going to be coding in JavaScript. And you'll notice that it pre-populated a template for us. I'll go over the template in a second, but then we have some other buttons here. We have a play button and we have a stop button right here. Okay. So we have a couple of functions. Don't get too scared. So we have this first thing, that's our setup function. And this is something that's going to be run at the beginning of your program. So when I press play, this will run once. Then we have this function called draw, which is going to be run every frame. Okay, so if I press play right now, you'll see on the side here that I've created a canvas of size 400 by 400 pixels. Waiting room. You got it? Thank you, Paul. And then we gave the background a color, and this is a value from 0 to 255. So if you're familiar with like RGB values going from 0 to 225, yes, that's what this is. Just two. So that's some sort of gray here. So let's go back. So that's our setup that we got there. Usually your first programming program might be Hello World. In this, we have a drawing program, so we're not doing Hello World. So now we're going to do two things. We're going to move the background to, well, actually, we'll keep the background where it is, but we're going to add in this function here called ellipse. That's going to draw an ellipse. And we'll see what this does. So I'm putting it here. It's going to create an ellipse with the center at point X and Y of my mouse. And it's going to be of size of width 50, height 50. So let's play and see what happens. So it's drawing every frame, the background, and then the ellipse. Now, if I move this background to the setup over here, oh, indentation, prettiness, okay. Now you'll see that the background got displayed once. And now we're drawing a circle, an ellipse, every frame. So if you move your mouse around. Yes, August. There is an ellipse function. And you can change the ellipse to any size you want. So the reason we have an ellipse function rather than a separate one for circle and ellipse is to make it more generic. So it can handle more cases than just circle. Yes. Getting ahead of us. I think that might be the next slide. All right. Oh, actually, it's not the next slide. Okay. So now we played around a little bit. Now let's start understanding the screen space so that we can understand drawing. If we press play here, you'll notice it started it off with this circle at this top left corner. Curious, because my mouse is not in there yet. Let's see why. So let's understand the screen space. So in graphics, you'll have the top left of your corner being the origin. So it's going to be 0, 0. Now, the reason being is like when you're on a web page, your web page grows down, right? Rather than growing up, so that when you scroll down, it kind of like grows the page. And that's kind of the reasoning why our top left corner is 0, 0, and our bottom right corner is the width and height of our page. Okay. So there's this example of like, what are the corners of this square? You'll have these corners being at 10, 10, 30, 10, 30, 30, 10, 30 here. And similarly with this triangle. And you'll see our bottom left corner is at 0 and the height of your screen. And this corner is the width and 0 of our screen. So that's understanding our screen space. August, fun with shapes. This is the slide for you. So let's break down that ellipse function that we just learned about. Ellipse takes in 4 parameters, A, B, C, D. I named that just because it would fit on the slide. So the first parameter is the X coordinate of the ellipse, and the Y coordinate of the ellipse is the next parameter, and that is the center of your ellipse. So that XY point is right here in the center. Actually, no, sorry. I think it's right here. Sorry. It would be like the top left corner of your ellipse. And then C is the width of your ellipse. And then D is the height of your ellipse. So that's what we're changing. Okay. So kind of getting that logic over here, you'll kind of see some other shapes here. You'll see a point, which is just an XY coordinate. You'll see a line that is 2 points. So it's the first point, XY, and then the second point, XY. A triangle is 3 points. So same thing. And then a quad is 4 points. There is a rectangle function, so don't be alarmed. You don't have to name every single point for a quad. So here's a rectangle. And it's very similar to the ellipse, wherein you have the X, Y coordinate of the top left corner of your rectangle. And then you have the width and height of your rectangle. So these are some fun shapes that you can kind of, or basic shapes that you can use to kind of create your canvas. So I have a challenge for you all. This is interactive. Welcome to the workshop. Draw a house using every one of those shapes. Now you can. And I'm going to go back to this slide to kind of help you. Remember that rectangle is basically the same parameters as the ellipse. So I'll give you some time to create a house. And then we're going to have some fun. So let's give like a couple minutes to 12:25, 5 minutes. And you're going to want to put that in here in your draw function. And instead of using mouse, you can just use like different parameters. Just to kind of put it on your screen space. Cool. And I'll leave that up. Questions too? Also, if anyone needs help. Okay. That was a head start. Now I need to make my house. Keep going. What I get for live coding. 225. All right, I made my house. Cool. And it's at 12:25. Nice. All right, so hopefully you have some form of a house. If not, you can copy mine. But that was a great way to kind of get started. Did you run into any errors? I hope you did. I hope you ran into errors. If you didn't, don't worry. We got errors for you. If you ran into any errors, you'll see some questions of like, what line was the error on? What does the error message say? There are some things, if you did run into errors, you might want to check your spelling. You might want to check your parentheses. You might want to check your logic, because sometimes there's something rendering wrong on the screen. I don't know if you saw, but my triangle was like all over the place when I was putting it up there. So you need to check your logic sometimes. And the program won't like yell at you for logic problems, but like you'll see something and be like, oh, this isn't rendering the way that I thought it would. Okay. Did the function expect what you were inputting, and did you expect what it outputted? That's the logic check. And then of course there's always ask for help. So let's take a look. So hopefully through this exercise you got some weird things, and hopefully you tested as you went. Good learnings. But now look at us. We just have this plain house. Let's think about spiffing that up a little bit more. Each shape has a property, has some default properties. So you'll see here that like an ellipse or any shape has a fill, it has a stroke, it has a stroke weight. By default, it is filled with white. The stroke color is black, and the stroke weight is 1 pixel. So that's by default what we drew. So let's change that. Let's have something more fun. So all the parameters you'll see here for color are going to be floats that range from 0 to 255. You can kind of, this is how you would initialize a color, but we're going to see how we're going to put that in. So let's try to change some colors. If you only had one parameter, you'll see that the colors will go from 0 to 255, and that will be in grayscale. If you did it with 2 parameters, you have your second parameter, and it will be like an alpha of like opacity, which will also go from 0 to 255. What we're mainly going to use is we're going to use this. We're going to use RGB values. So let's color our house a little bit. So let's take a look at some functions to help with that. Let's start with fill. So imagine that I am drawing and I have a pen in my hand, and everything that I draw with my pen is going to have this color. So if I put fill here, you'll notice that it has open my parentheses for me. I'm going to make my pen right now red. So that's going to be 255, 0, 0. Let's see what happens here. I press play, you'll notice that everything turned red. And this is because right now I've changed my basic shape properties, or basic properties of the pen that I was using to draw, and I've changed it so now it's red. Okay. If I put it later down, if I do another color change later on, so if I do like fill, someday I should memorize like some pretty colors, but for right now I'm using RGB values. If I change it later on, you'll see that the rectangle and the triangle remain red, while this ellipse is green. Layering order is important. So if the code's going to execute line by line. So this ellipse is drawn on top of the rectangle and triangle. If I moved this here, my circle's not going to show up because my rectangle is on top. Okay. I'm actually, yeah, cool. I'm going to move. Actually, yeah, we'll just leave that there. It's fine. Okay, so let's move that back down here. But now you can kind of decorate your house with some fill colors. If you wanted to give the stroke of your pen like a color, you could do this function called stroke. And let's see, we'll make that blue. If I press play here, you'll notice that it's hard to tell. Okay. You'll notice that everything turned. It's hard to see. But everything, actually, I can make the stroke weight bigger. That'll make it easier. I give it the stroke weight of 5. I think you'll see. What is easier to see? Oof, they're all bad colors. Okay. You'll see that everything has a stroke of blue. Now, why is this? The reason being this function draw is actually called every frame. So when you end this draw, it's going to continue back and go back up here. And because my pen didn't like change the stroke before or reset that, it is still giving me a stroke of blue. And so it then on the next frame redraws everything on top with these kind of new things. So that's kind of a snag you'll see there. Something you could do is have like a reset or something like that. Or in this case, we don't really need frames, right? So you can do something that I think is, I think it's called like no loop. So if I put this function here, it's called no loop. It will only call this draw function once, and it will not go back to the top at the end of my frame. So that was a logic error. that we had. That was confusing and it was like, that's not what I wanted. I only wanted to like make my triangle and my circle have a stroke. Those are the kind of things. There is great documentation for all of this. So if you ever wanted to like look at it, you can. It's just on their website. But yeah, your challenge here, hopefully maybe you were following along, is to color your house and manipulate with some shape properties. I'm not going to give you much time for that though, because I want to show you an example with some shape properties. So there are some things that you can do. I'm just going to copy paste all of this while this all happens. Oh, and I deleted my house in the process. So hopefully I don't need that later on in this presentation. Oh, great canvas. I used to teach this workshop in Java. So I've had to change some of the functions. So this is an example of what you can do with shape properties and stuff. You can see like different shapes, give them different lines, and you can kind of get a little bit fancy, a little bit something with your pattern. Imagine having this being like your carpet or something like that, you know? Cool. You guys know variable types. You guys can code. So now I guess we're going to get into the point of like, why am I using processing if I already know how to use like Photoshop or Illustrator? Like, what's the point? Why am I trying to make this and figuring out what all the points are? Why am I going through the screen space to go through all this effort? Well, here's some cool things you can't do in Illustrator. There's some useful preset values. So in our first program, we made an interactive canvas, right? We made an interactive canvas where you could draw circles everywhere. There's some other useful preset values like the dimensions. There's like the width and height of your canvas, of your screen. There's also your previous mouse coordinates, which will get interesting actually. And that is the previous mouse coordinates of the previous frame. Okay. And then there are some Boolean values where you have like my mouse is pressed or some key is pressed. We're going to get into that in a hot second. And you have some useful math numbers like pi. You can see more preset values on their website, but let's hop into conditionals because we got conditionals here. Is anyone not familiar with JavaScript? Cool. Great. August. Cool. I'm talking to you, August. So to create a conditional, it's basically something like, if this condition is true, I'm going to do these set of instructions. Otherwise, I'm going to do these set of instructions. And the else is kind of optional. You don't need to do that. But this is a more complicated example. Let's go back to where we were before. I'm going to make our background 220 again. We're going to start off with, I'm going to clear out my draw function. Let's do something really simple. I'm going to do something that's like, if my mouse is pressed, I'm going to draw a point at mouse X, mouse Y. Points are really small. Let me do an ellipse. That was really hard to see. So my mouse is over the page. So this is a kind of advanced of like what we did in our first program, right? Now I wrapped it in a conditional. So now I'm only doing this, drawing an ellipse, if my mouse is pressed. That's kind of cool. Let's take a look at what this example did. So in this example, it draws squares if my mouse is not pressed, or it switches to ellipses when it is pressed. So that's kind of a quick thing that you could do. You'll see here, I have that same conditional, mouse is pressed. Here, it's drawing an ellipse of random width and height. Sorry, at a random point on the screen with a random width. And then here, if it's not, my mouse is not pressed, it's drawing a rectangle. So that's kind of where this is going. But that's a neat little like interactive thing. Math. I didn't forget about you. Math lovers in the room. I don't want to admit, it's okay. It's okay. We have things like pluses, minuses, multiplication, division, parentheses. There's trig functions in here. Trig lovers, geometry. I got a woo in the room, okay? All right. And then some other things that you might be familiar with, logical symbols like greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, testing equality, ands and ors. Oh, I think this isn't. I don't think this is a thing. And okay, cool. Do I want to do this challenge? No, I don't want to do this challenge. We're gonna move on for time purposes. So if you did, the challenge would have been to draw circles on half of the screen and then draw squares on the right half of the screen when your mouse rolls over it. That would have been the challenge, but we're moving on. Because now we're also going to talk about cool things that you can do in processing that you could not do in Adobe Illustrator. So we have things called arrays or lists. They're just a list of information. They're going to be all of the same type for each one. So in this instance, I have data. The cool thing about processing is that you can take data from and then visualize it. So we're going into data visualization here. In this example, we have this const coffees. This is how many coffees I theoretically drank. I don't drink coffee though. In the last 4 days, I guess. So 5, 2, 1, 4. Note that it starts at index 0. So this would be 54 at index 0, 22, 2, and 4. So we're introducing data into our program now. Cool. So let's draw our data. Okay. So I am going to make an array of numbers. To do that in JavaScript, I'm actually going to do this and clear up my functions a little bit. I'm actually going to do this at the top, might as well. So I created an array, a constant, numbers, and I initialized it with these numbers. They're just random numbers that I threw in there. And now we're going to use this array to power our visualization. Okay. We got some coders in the room, which is great, which means there's 4 loops. So I'm going to do a for loop on this array of numbers. I guess I'm in JavaScript, so I can do for n in numbers. Can I do that? Am I in the wrong? Can I do this? Then I'm going to draw an ellipse grab this. Oh no, I actually do want to make it better. Usually I would do this, but here we are. So I'm initializing I in our for loop to 0, and I is going to be less than numbers dot length, which is the length of our array list. And then I'm going to increment I. And in this, I am going to give it some sort of color based on this value that we got in numbers. And then we're going to draw an ellipse from that. Oh, I totally tested this before this event. There it is. I had to create the canvas. But you'll see here that I created a color, which is like just like a random red value here. I gave it the same green value and the same blue value. And so that's the different colors of these ellipses. And then I created the placement of these ellipses using the index that I got of each one of these numbers. And then I moved that along the x-axis. And then the height was the height of the screen. So this is going to be the y coordinate. The height of the screen minus the number. I made the width 40, and I made the height of the ellipse the number in the array. But this is visualizing that data. So that's kind of cool. Cool. We got to get extra parts. I wanted to get here if we had a crowd of coders. Another cool thing is that there's this random function as well. I love a good random. And basically, it's going to generate a value that is in between the range of the start and end. And so in this example, I'm using it as a random opacity, as well as a random width and height for my ellipse. So in my setup, I created the canvas, I'm giving a background, and then here I'm using random to get a random opacity, and then drawing an ellipse using a random value for the width and height. And you can create something like that. It's kind of cool though. This is the challenge I really like to do, but let's see. Oh. Do we want to do this challenge? I think so. Yeah, let's do this challenge. Draw 10 concentric squares using a for loop. Now that you got some tools underneath your belt, I'll give you a 3-minute head start. And then I'll jump in trying to figuring it out. But now you got some tools of like data, you got tools of for loop, you kind of create some sort of visualization. You did it? No? What are you showing? That's cool. I want to know. That was a bad choice. Forgot this wasn't in my pocket. So we got some hints. Notice that these concentric squares, I would start with the big square first. Because if you try the small square, you're going to be drawing squares on top and hiding that small square. So your hint is to start from the backmost layer first. What? Oh, you could. Or you could make it transparent. Man. Yes, sport. Yes. There is a z-axis. Getting fancy. You can also do 3D objects in processing if you wanted to. And that gets kind of interesting in terms of rotation and other things like that. But that is not in this workshop, but cool stuff to learn. All right, you guys had the head start. Now it's my turn. I just have the answer. But I can go through it. Oh, this is still going. Okay. So I press play here. You'll see I created a for loop. And then I made it go from 1 to 10, basically. And then I created this constant for side just to change the width of the. Oh, I did the no fill thing. Oh, I thought I didn't. Wow. Wow. I didn't realize I did that. If I take it out, the square draws on top of itself.
What did you put it at the end?
At the end of the draw function. So it's going to loop back. And it's in the second frame that it drew it all over again. It's hard to, okay. So in the first iteration, okay, so if I did put no loop here, you'll see that it drew all of these on top of each other. And then in the second frame, the pen now has no fill and then it draws it all on top. That's strange. Cool. I'm just gonna throw this example out there. You can get even fancier with some nested for loops if you want to do like a 2D array situation. I'm not gonna make this a challenge or anything. But here we have a canvas of circles. And we have kind of the points at which all of those circles are at. And we change the color based on its position. So that's something cool that you can do as well. But the basics of all of this is that now in processing, you have tools to create shapes, but use data to kind of manipulate that and create some other visualizations. So I think that's kind of like the power of it all. If we go to the website, there's like examples. Here they are, sorry. You can see what other things there are. Something fun are L systems. Make trees. Hopefully this is an example of a tree. Oh, it's not. It's an example of a maze. But you can kind of go around and see like what other things you could use. There's some 3D examples here. So these are some 3D objects you could draw. And you can kind of think about what sort of things that you might want to visualize. Well, yeah. If you did want to bring in data, you would have to like kind of clean up your data, which would be like, you got your data in like some sort of CSV. You would need to kind of clean it up and format it for processing, converting things to like pure data types. So I wouldn't be able to do something like 2 a.m., but I could do something like 200, right? So you have to clean up your data and then export it probably as like a CSV to then import that into processing. And then that is something that you could use. Okay. You would save it as a CSV and then you would upload that in. And then you would be able to do something with that. I don't think I have, it's an image. Well, but that's basically it. Questions, thoughts, ideas? Mila?
Yeah, I don't know if you know some of the history of processing. Because as far as I remember, it was a Java first.
Yes. Yeah. So this workshop I taught in Java, which is why some of it looks very Java. So I taught it in Java for like 3 years, I think. And then in like, I don't know, I think like 2018 or something, that's when they made it for JavaScript. I know it's in JavaScript, it's in Python, it's in Java. Those are the 3 languages that I know that this library works in. Yes, so I'm using P5.js mostly because they have a web editor. And then that meant in this workshop, none of you needed to download anything. But there is a standalone. So if I go here, if I go to processing here, there is an editor that you can download. So it'd be a standalone app on your computer. And there you could code in Java and other things like that. I didn't want to do that for the workshop because then that would require downloading. Oh, you might just need to like rewrite it. I don't think they're like going between the languages. I don't think there's an easy way to just automatically do that, but I'm sure someone might have written a converter from like Java to JavaScript. It might not make the cleanest JavaScript, but like I just saw like in my for loops, like those aren't for loops that I would normally write in JavaScript. And that's because I wrote this all in Java and then changed all of it last night. Questions?
No,
Yeah.
so if you want to create complex shapes,
Mhm.
like I'm assuming that is a line shape, but what if you want to create curve?
Oh, yes, there are curve functions. There's like Bezier, and other things like that. There's also custom shapes. So we saw like you had like quad, but then there's one that's just like a whole custom shape you could put like 1,000,000 points in. But there are curves. Yeah, things like that. Cool. Well, thank you so much. There might be still pizza in the back, so take it to go or things like that. Thank you so much for participating. Yeah, no worries.
I'm just curious, for processing like orders, some of like I say that real world applications or like what do artists I've like,
Mhm.
used it for.
Okay.
Because I've been browsing and I feel like a lot of sound libraries as well.
Oh, yeah.
And we also, I mean, you showed us a lot of the basic shapes, so I'm just curious, is it like where people, I mean, on the website, it says like, prototyping. Do people use it for like, say, just like prototyping things or like doing some kind of art, like visualization, for their installation? I'm just curious, like, what do people use for?
I think, so the question was, what kind of the use cases for processing? And I think it's all of those things that you mentioned. Like, I use it most as a sketchbook, as like a try this out kind of thing. You can make this whole installation if you wanted to. You can make small little apps like that, like where you can use key presses, and there is a sound library in processing as well. But usually I kind of think of processing as a visual library, because of the sound you're going to get is going to be like MIDI, which is nice. And then I don't know, I think you could use it. It's mainly for like art projects. Like I don't think that there's like, it's like a creative way to visualize your data, not necessarily the most like scientific way to like visualize your data. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool stuff.
If you export it to SVP or
Yes, you can. So to do that, you could go here and then you could save it. Oh, so you have to log in. But yes, you can save it as an SVG, which is actually kind of cool. And then you can bring it into Illustrator and manipulate. And I have done that before. Yeah, if you can't save it like that, I think there's like a function, but I've definitely done that because that's what I teach the art students to do. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you all on Zoom too.
there's